So welcome everybody to, what day is this? Is this the 23rd, April 23rd? This is curriculum and instruction class. It's the 8 a.m. version. This is our second to last week of class. You'll have time over the finals week to complete everything. I'm not gonna leave you hanging on stuff like that. So if there's stuff that you need to get done that you haven't gotten done, you've got plenty of time. We got basically 3 weeks to get everything done. And there's only one significant event that's on the horizon now, and this is the lesson plan stuff. So today we're going to start talking about the lesson plan. I'm going to essentially have kind of steps along the way. Today's the 23rd. I'm going to ask that you have a preliminary plan turned into me by the 26th. And it says the due date for the final plan is the 29th. I'm going to stick with that, but we have, excuse me, we've got that week of leeway then for finals week. So if something has gone wrong with the plan, you still got time to fix it. It's basically what it boils down to. So we don't want anybody to get left behind. But by the same token, if I just said, oh, it's due then, and everybody turns it in at the same time at the very end, which is what I would do, if there's something wrong with it, then there wouldn't be an opportunity to fix it. So that's why we're doing this the way that we're doing. I think I'll open up by just asking if there's any questions about Competency 8, which is a fairly, it was pretty wide open, and my experience with student emails and texts and things is that maybe we just left it too wide open. So I would just invite any questions about Competency 8, which is the comparison between understanding by design and project-based learning. Really have any questions about what the actual assignment would be or things along those lines? And if you do, and if you don't want to ask them now, we can wait till the very end. That's fine. Okay, so just like I do normally, I'll just wait at the end of class till everybody logs off, and if you have something that you need to ask me, you can do that at the end. So let's move into share a screen here. We're going to move into the idea of lesson planning, and where we're going to take this from is the week 5 template, or the week 5 module. So that's where we'll get most of our stuff. But you see there's also stuff in the week 6 module too. So I'm going to introduce some basic stuff today. You're going to get to look at, I think there's 5 different lesson plans that you're going to sift through in a group of 3. Just kind of get some familiarity with that. We're going to break down like the mother of all lesson plans, which is the Hunter model. And as we break down the Hunter model, pretty much every other element of every other lesson plan style is there as well. But to break down the Hunter model, since it is kind of the quintessential lesson plan, we'll try to break that one down, and then you can kind of mix and match your own style after that. And then I'm actually going to go ahead and walk through the lesson plan assignment today, knowing that over the next couple of class days, we're going to add a couple extra things to it. But I'll walk through the basic assignment today so that you can kind of get started. I will also offer this as a group project. If you have somebody that you want to work with, the intention is a group of 2. If you can convince me there's a need for a group of 3, I might do that. Groups of 4, that's too many. But so if you've got somebody else that you want to work with, just let me know, and we can probably work through that too. So I'll share my screen with you. We're going to do a walkthrough of basic information about a lesson plan. And then I'm going to give you somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes with a group to kind of go through several different plans, and we'll come back, look all the way through the Hunter plan, and then, like I said, I'll give you that assignment. So if we were opening up in class, then what I would do is I would give you time at your table group to kind of think about the relationship between a curriculum map, a unit plan, and a lesson plan. So rather than 5 minutes with a partner, I'll give you like 30 seconds to kind of contemplate what the relationship of those 3 terms is: curriculum map, unit plan, lesson plan. How would those relate with each other? And in the end, we would have a class discussion, but as I said, it's hard to do that with what we've got going on now. And hopefully what you would find, or what you would talk about in the groups that you were discussing, is that the relationship would look something like this. And the curriculum map, as we showed you here a couple weeks ago, is the scope and sequence of everything that you teach in your class throughout the course of the year. It encompasses everything, all standards, all units, everything in there. is encompassed in the curriculum map or the scope and sequence. The individual unit plans are also included in that scope and sequence. Unit plans are designed around standards, as we've talked about. You recently have kind of annotated your unit plan. By the way, I will get the final one of those back to you as soon as I can. And actually, I should have asked if you had any further questions about that too, but we can ask those at the end. But the unit plan encompasses probably anywhere between 3 to 6 weeks of instruction. It's got the assessments already designed. It's got all the standards that you've designed. And then the idea is that within the framework of that unit plan, you kind of fill in the instructional gaps after the assessment's already been designed. And that's where the lesson plans come in. Lesson plans are kind of the day-to-day stuff that you do content-wise in the framework of your classroom. And so my assumption is you probably haven't designed a full-on lesson plan before. This class is designed to help you create that first lesson plan. So why do we do it? Lesson plans, I mean, you can read this. They're a daily roadmap of what you will do each day to ensure that you will meet those enduring understandings in the units, the transfer goals. Remember what we want students to actually retain with them after the unit is done. And you also must be sure that you hit the standards in the lesson plans that you're doing. I think this is a really important thing. So I'll read that. Daily lesson plans require us to think about how we're going to meet the individual needs of students in our classrooms. And the other thing I would add to that is that lesson plans, as long as you've got something written down, you can always reflect back on what happened in your classroom. And so I will come to a full honesty at 5 minutes into class here. As a teacher, when I was in my classroom, I always had a lesson plan going into the day. I always had a lesson plan. Did I always do it in the format that I'm about to show you? And the answer to that 100% is no. In fact, rarely did I do it in the format that I'm going to show you. Although I think, and other folks in the department agree with me, that it's important for you to know what the correct format is so that when you're in your classroom, you can speak to it and you can write to it, but you don't have to do everything that's in the plan every day. To do a full-on lesson plan every day for every subject, depending on where you're at and what school and how many preps you've got, that could be really exhausting. But nonetheless, it's really important to know the components of the plan so that you can write to it. And it's important to have a plan of some sort. When I was a principal, that's what I would tell my teachers. I don't care exactly how you do your plans, but I do care that every time I walk into your classroom, if I ask you, what's the plan, then you can actually have that conversation with me. And most importantly, if I ask your students, hey, what are you guys actually doing today? Your students in an instant could answer me because you've told them, because you have a plan. Okay, so that's why we do this the way that we're doing it. Okay, so I'm going to break you guys into, I think, groups of 3. And in that group of 3, I'm going to ask you to go to the course websites into week 5. And there's a thing here, it's called lesson plan templates. Everybody kind of see that? Give me a thumbs up if that's something you see. Okay. When you click on lesson plan templates, there are 5 different templates that come up. Something called the 5E plan. If you are a science or math person, I believe that in your content area classes, you'll be asked to do 5E lesson plans. So just keep that in mind. This thing is called the Modified Hunter Lesson Plan. Madeline Hunter was kind of a teaching guru from many years back, and she designed kind of the quintessential lesson plan. And that's the plan that when I've done lesson plans, this is my preference of a plan. So this is the one I'm going to go through. But pretty much every element, I think, what you'll notice is that every element of a lesson plan, if it's a good style of plan, many of the elements are the same. And so that's kind of what I'm going to ask you to, as a group, to compare. Look at these 5 different plans. What's the same about them? What's different? And then when we come back here, as I said, in about probably about 8 to 10 minutes, I will run through the Hunter plan with you as far as each of the steps along the way. I will answer any questions that you might have, and then I'll give you the actual competency assignment. So again, you're going to go to week 5. You're going to go to lesson plan templates in your group. You're kind of look through these with each other, kind of figure out what's the same, what's different. We'll come back, talk about that a little bit, and then we'll move on to the next thing. So I'm going to pause the recording. There we go. Recording again. So as you looked at those, the 5, I don't know how many of the 5 you were able to get to. Hopefully the 5E and then the Hunter plan. Any of those pop out as Um, this is like the lesson plan for me, or is it too soon? Too soon.
Yeah, I felt like they looked like overwhelming to me
Yep.
at least. I
Yep.
was like,
Uh, yes. So again, I would say that I I don't know that I know any classroom teacher that did like the full lesson plan for every lesson they taught each day. I just don't know that that's the case. However, you should be aware of each of the components of the lesson plan so that when we ask you, you know, what's your anticipatory set, you can talk about how you're going to get students into the framework of your class, or how are you going to assess for the day, and you can kind of speak to that about how you're going to end class, or what's your instructional activity that when you know, here's your standard, what's the instructional activity that you're going to use to help students understand that, you know. So that's the reason we do this, the full thing, so that you can pick and choose what you think are the necessary components when you go into your own classroom later on. And it's not going to be that much longer, you know. Within about 4 years you guys are going to be doing this for real in an actual honest to goodness classroom. And so that does, I don't know, 4 years seems like a long time, but think about your high school career, for instance. 4 years probably disappeared pretty fast. And in the grand scheme of things, 4 years in your life is, you know, it's a very small amount of time. So, and not to mention that as you go out and do your own practicum stuff here in less than 4 years, you'll probably be asked to create lesson plans and things for that too. So again, that's why we're kind of doing this. Let's take the Hunter plan, and I'm going to break down some of the elements of the Hunter plan for you, um, just so that we're kind of on the same page with it. Whoa, what am I doing here? Okay. If you do have access to that, you can kind of open up the Hunter plan and look through. Otherwise, we'll just go through it, and um, you can look for it afterward too. That's fine too. Okay, so you know, we're going to ask you on the lesson plans that you create, we're going to ask you to have a title on your lesson plans. Whichever framework that you choose, whether it's 5E or Hunter or some other framework, we're going to ask you to have a title. Flat out, did I have a title on every single one of the lessons that I taught every single day that I taught as a teacher? No, I did not. Um, but for this, we're going to ask you to do the title. Okay. Um, the time frame, 30 to 45 minutes. There's going to be a space on the Hunter plan for sure, and maybe on the 5E plan where you can just where you put the time frame. That may seem silly to you, but if you're looking through your old lesson plans and you know that you want to teach a particular thing and you've got a certain amount of time on a certain day, you can look for that and go, oh, this is about a 20-minute deal, 15-minute deal. You can use it in that way. Okay. Another thing that we're going to ask you to put on your plan are the materials that you need for the plan. And again, at first glance, that seems maybe kind of silly, but honestly, of all of these things on this sheet, or on this slide, this is the most useful thing for me. And one of the things I always try to do on the plans that I make, so that when I look back at them, if I choose to use them again, I don't have to go through the full plan to say, oh, I need this and this and this. Got to bring chart paper, got to bring marker, whatever. Just put it up front so that you know, and that's one less stressor for you. Your future self will thank your past self if you do that. Okay. Every lesson plan that you create, regardless of the format that you use, needs to have the learning standard, the GLE, whatever it is that you're the state that you end up in chooses to call it. But the standard in some way needs to be put on your lesson plans so that you know, and by extension, your students know what it is that they're supposed to know. Through that standard, hopefully in the framework of the unit plan, you will have already established the learning objectives. This is something we did back in Principles of Assessment. You'll have the learning objective on the plan. Um, in we actually did them, I think, in Principles as I can statements. Totally acceptable to have an I can statement on your lesson plan. In fact, it might be better that way, so that you can just transfer that to the board or to your PowerPoint or whatever, so that students know right away what they're going to do for that particular day. Okay, if you choose to look through this PowerPoint, I'm going to ask you to not worry about this ABCD model for writing objectives. We've already written objectives in the principles class. I don't think there's any need to rehash that. It's, in my experience, more confusing to people to look at this, and it's not needed. So ignore that. But do establish the I can statements. So you've written objectives, you've written them as I can statements. Be sure that we see I can statements on the lesson plan, whichever format that you end up using. In the Hunter plan, there's something called an anticipatory set. On the 5E plan, it's not called that. I think it's called engagement. How is it that you bring your students into the framework of the lesson? Okay, how do you get them ready for what they're going to learn? That's an anticipatory set. In the Hunter plan, if it's a true Hunter plan, she asks that you basically write a script for your anticipatory set. So if you were an elementary teacher, for instance, you would say, yesterday class, we talked about adding two-digit numbers to two-digit numbers. Today class, we're going to talk about adding three-digit numbers to two-digit numbers. And that statement right there is one of the reasons I never became a math teacher. I can't say the word digit, but she suggests that you actually script it out. I was a big fan of the Hunter plan. Did I ever script out my anticipatory sets? I did not. So you do you and what you need to do. But on the plan in some way needs to be, how do you engage your students? How do you pull them into the framework of the plan? How do you get them ready? Is it a video that you show them? Is it just a flat out reminder of what you did yesterday in class and what you're going to do today? Is it an opening activity of some sort that gets them interested? Is it a story? Is it an excerpt from a book? Whatever it is, it's an anticipatory set. It's how you bring them into the class. The next part of a lesson plan, and specifically the Hunter plan, but also other types of lesson plans that you do, they talk about a gradual release of responsibility in the lesson plan. The first thing that happens is the teacher does things. I am showing you something. I am modeling this for you. I am telling you about this. The second thing is sometimes this is called guided practice, okay? I'm going to do this on the board. I'll start this on the board. Go back to our math problems. You write the problem down on the board, have little Timmy come up to the board, and Timmy, under your direction, completes the problem. That's a we do kind of thing, okay? The last thing that is in the framework of this modeling or this lesson planning is the idea that students do it on their own, okay? So explanation, I do. We do, sometimes that's called guided practice. And then you do, sometimes that's called individual practice, okay? And that can represent any number of things. So I used the math example, but I was a social studies teacher. So if we were talking about different personalities of World War II, some of the totalitarian dictators that came about, I would tell them about them. We might practice identifying them together, and then I would break them into smaller groups, and they could quiz each other about who each of those fellows was, okay? That's the I do, we do, you do set of ideas that Hunter kind of brings forth. Oh, and there's more explanation here. So if you're confused about that, you can kind of look through there. So after the I do, we do, you do, there's always, in some framework of the lesson plan, a check for understanding. And a good lesson plan will have you do it more often than once, right? So how are you going to check for understanding? During each lesson, check for students' possession of understanding or observe students' performance to make sure they have the skills necessary to achieve the instructional objective. So you tell them about it during the we do portion of it, as the guided practice portion of it. You can go around the class and see if they're doing it correctly. During the individual portion of it, you can solicit students privately. You can ask them, one-on-one whether they know what's going on. You can, as a whole class, do the thumbs up. Fist of 5 actually is something that I ended up doing, even though it sounds like it's an elementary thing. It worked well in secondary time as well. How is it that you are going to check for your students' understanding? Some people do an exit ticket at the end. That's one way, but you should do it also before the end of class. You should do it throughout the framework of your class as well. How do you build that into your lesson plan? And there are more examples in there, so you can kind of read through those. Students doing activity independently. The idea is that once students can't perform without major errors or confusion, they're ready to continue without their teacher. This is an important thing here. Not all students will reach the independent activity stage at the same time. You may have to continually support some, and some until way out in the framework of the plan may not be ready for it. Sometimes you build in accommodations for students in the classroom. Eventually, over the course of this 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to talk about how do you differentiate your lesson plan. I don't want to even get into that today because we're throwing so much at you. But how is it that you can account for all of the learners in your classroom in the one lesson plan? When we come back on Tuesday, I'll talk a little bit more about that. But you have to be aware that not every student is going to be ready for independent practice at the same time. Assessment strategy. How will you be sure that students can achieve the I can statements? How is it that you're going to measure for that assessment? The one that I referred to before, the idea of an exit ticket. Can students at the end of class do a quick sum up for you of what you talked about? Okay, that's one way to do it. Do you open up the next day's class with a quick quiz of what students were supposed to learn the day before? Okay, how do you plan to prove that your students know what it is they're supposed to know? Okay, that's the assessment strategy. And closure. How do you summarize? What is it that you do to bring students back to the main idea of the thing they were supposed to learn at the beginning? If you remember Marzano and Hattie, and in particular Hattie, I know did some research about the idea of closure, and research indicates that practice of closure is one of the most effective instructional strategies in terms of student achievement, but we often overlook it because we're running out of time. We need to get the students into the next class period. The bell just rang, okay? A really important component in every lesson plan that you do is the idea, not just of how you're going to assess them, but how it is that you're going to close the lesson, okay? Even just a general repeat of what you did throughout the framework of the day, plus a chance to ask questions at the end. That's a form of closure. And research does tell us that students perform better, they achieve more if you can do something like that. Okay. I have just thrown an awful lot of stuff at you. This assignment is not, it's not like the other competency assessments in this class. The first two, I think they weren't easy, but they're not going to, they didn't take as long as this one's going to take you. Okay, to design a full out lesson plan is going to take you a while. And that's why I want to make sure we have the 3 weeks here to make this happen, especially because of how we have to communicate with each other these days. Okay. So, once again, as I offer closure of our lesson here, we're going to look at this idea of lesson planning. You are going to choose one of the different plan frameworks that we threw at you. If you're a math or science person, as I said, I know that eventually you're going to do 5E in your department, so it might be worthwhile to take a look at that. Most other departments are probably Hunter plans, so if you have an inside line on what it is that if you're secondary, that your department does, that's fine. Probably, I don't know. As far as elementary ed, I can see merits for both of those styles. So you choose what you want to do. We'll have about 3 weeks to get that done if we need to take the full 3 weeks. But once again, understand that I want there to be some sort of a preliminary plan by the 26th, which I think is that let's see. It's at Monday, yeah, Monday, so that when we come back on Tuesday, you can ask questions. And then I think, I'm sorry, the 26th is a Wednesday of next week, so that we can ask questions on Tuesday, come back on Thursday and ask them if you want to after I try to give you feedback. The final plan will be due on the Friday. But again, as I give you feedback on that, if there's something that you're missing, you'll have the full finals week time to get it done. So that's the general plan. Let me share my screen with you one more time and show you where you can find the lesson plan assignment. That will be in, where is it? Okay, so it's in week 6, assessment competency 5, developing a lesson plan. Okay, notice there's a lesson plan draft for April 26th, just a draft of the plan. If it's not completely done, that's okay. Just get a start on it, okay? And I will give you feedback on what you've got so far. Submit a draft of your plan by April 26th. I'll try to give you feedback. As I said, we'll meet then, at least in one class period after that. I'll try to give you the feedback for that. Assessment competency 5, developing the lesson plan. The lesson plan is complete, includes all elements of a research-based lesson design written correctly and explicitly. What we mean by that is if you choose the Hunter plan, make sure that all the components of the Hunter plan are there. Don't skip one, okay? If you choose a 5E plan, make sure that all the components of the plan are included. Don't skip one. And then eventually, as I said, next week on Tuesday, we'll get into the idea of differentiation, just so you can work on that a little bit. But the main deal is looking at the plan, designing the plan. Okay. As far as the standards that you use, you're free to use whichever standards you want to pull from the Missouri Learning Standards. You can break those down into objectives. If you want, you've already done that in the Principles of Assessment class. If you want to revisit the standard that you broke down and the I can statements that you came up with based on that, that's probably the direction that I would go. But if that's not where you want to go, it doesn't matter to me. As long as you have a standard, it's broken down, and you've got the objectives or I can statements listed, and everything else flows from that. Okay? Okay. Questions? Okay, it is pretty overwhelming. Tuesday, we have some stuff to do, so it won't be the straight office hour day like the last 2 weeks have been, but it won't take the full time. So if you do have questions about things, we'll just have an extended question and answer session on that Tuesday. As I said, then the preliminary thing will be due on Wednesday. If it's not completely done, that's okay. Just show me what you got up until then. And then Friday of next week is the full plan. If you want, you are welcome to work with a partner, as I said. If you want with a group of 3, I might allow it, but you're going to have to kind of talk to me about it. If you want to work with this another single person, I'm quite okay with it. You don't have to ask me about it. But in the end, both of you need to submit a lesson plan. Does that make sense? You can't just submit it from one because it's a competency. We've got to have it from all of you. All right. Final questions. Okay. I will see you on Tuesday for sure. But if you have questions between now and then, you can email me. Honestly, right now, my email is kind of piling up. So if you have a pretty pressing question, a text is not a bad thing. I'll give you my phone number now, but it's also in the syllabus, 660-254-4424. 660-254-4424. So you can text me. You're probably not in my phone, so do tell me who you are when you're texting. All right. If you have questions about the understanding by design versus PBL, I'll hang around for that. If you have questions about 1 through 4, also competencies, I'll hang around for that. Otherwise, you all are free to head out, and I will see you later on. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.